I never imagined that my own parents would one day look me in the eye and tell me my children weren't welcome in their home. Yet there I was, standing in my kitchen, staring at my phone in disbelief. Thanksgiving was just a few weeks away, and my mom's voice was unusually light as she spoke. "Honey, we need to talk about Thanksgiving this year." My heart warmed for a moment. Despite the tension that had existed between us over the years, I still longed for these family traditions. My kids, Emma and Lucas, adored their grandparents. "Of course, Mom. What's the plan?" I asked, already picturing their house filled with the smell of roasted turkey, cinnamon, and the warmth of a family gathering. There was a brief pause, just long enough to send a chill down my spine. "Well," Mom continued, clearing her throat, "this year we're doing things a little differently. It's going to be a smaller dinner, just adults, something more intimate." I frowned. "So, no kids at all?" Another pause, then more hesitantly, "Well, no, not exactly." A cold knot twisted in my stomach. "What do you mean?" Mom let out a sigh, as if she were the one being put in an uncomfortable position. "Allie, we love your kids, we really do, but they're a bit, energetic. Honestly, we just feel like it would be better if you left them with a sitter this year." I gripped the edge of the counter. "So, just my kids? What about Daniel's?" Daniel, my older brother, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my parents' eyes, even when he did. Mom hesitated, and that's when I knew. "Daniel and Sophie are coming with their boys," she admitted. "But you know how well-behaved they are, Allie. They're just quieter, more refined. It's easier to have them at the table." A wave of heat flushed through me. I felt like I had been slapped, like the floor had suddenly been pulled out from under me. "They're just children," I said, my voice tight. "Emma is 7 and Lucas is 4. Of course they have energy, but they're sweet and they love you." "We're just trying to have a peaceful evening," Mom replied, her tone clipped and now irritated that I wasn't just accepting this. "It's not personal, Allie." "Not personal?" I clenched my jaw, swallowing back the sharp words fighting to spill out. It wasn't just about Thanksgiving. It was the way they had always treated my children like an afterthought, while putting Daniel's boys on a pedestal. The way they showed up at their school plays but never came to Emma's dance recital. The way Christmas gifts were always just a little extra for Daniel's kids. And now, they weren't even hiding it. "I can't believe this," I whispered. "You're actually telling me that my kids aren't welcome, but Daniel's are?" "Oh, Allie, don't be dramatic," Mom said. "It's just one dinner. You and Liam are still invited, of course." I almost laughed at the absurdity. They wanted me there, but not the two people I loved most in this world. I swallowed hard. "No, Mom, if my kids aren't welcome, then neither am I." A long silence stretched between us. Then Mom exhaled sharply, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Suit yourself," she said, and just like that she hung up. I stood there, staring at the phone, my breath unsteady. I could hear my kids in the next room, giggling as they built a pillow fort, oblivious to the fact that their grandparents, the ones they adored, had just cast them aside like an inconvenience. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. I had spent my whole life trying to please my parents, trying to earn their approval. But at what cost? And if I let them get away with this, if I went to that dinner while my children sat at home wondering why they weren't good enough, what kind of mother would that make me? I wasn't doing this anymore. They had made their choice. Now it was time for me to make mine. And they would regret it sooner than they thought. The weight of my mother's words lingered long after the call ended. I stood in my kitchen, the quiet hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My phone was still clutched in my hand, my fingers trembling as I set it down. My heart pounded with a mixture of anger and sadness. I had always known my parents favored Daniel, but I had convinced myself that it wasn't as bad as it seemed, that deep down they loved all of us equally. But tonight, they had ripped away any illusion of fairness. They didn't even try to hide it anymore. They loved his children more. A sudden laugh, pure and carefree, echoed from the living room. I turned to see Emma and Lucas still playing in their pillow fort, completely unaware of the rejection that had just taken place. My chest tightened. They deserved better. I squared my shoulders and walked into the living room, forcing a smile. "All right, you two," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Who's ready for movie night?" Lucas immediately perked up. can we watch the one with the talking dog? I scooped him up into my arms, kissing his soft curls. Of course we can, buddy. But as we curled up on the couch, the anger inside me refused to settle. I had spent years trying to fit into my parents' world, playing by their rules, hoping that if I just did everything right, they would finally see me as equal to Daniel. But it had never been enough, and I was done trying. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my brother, Daniel. Mom said you're being difficult about Thanksgiving. Why do you always have to make everything so dramatic? I stared at the screen, my jaw tightening. Of course she had already run to him. Me? So she told you she uninvited my kids but invited yours? The typing bubbles appeared, then stopped. A minute passed before he finally responded. Daniel, she just wants a calm dinner, Allie. You know how your kids can be a lot, like they were a burden. Like they were something to be tolerated, not loved. Something inside me snapped. Enjoy your perfect Thanksgiving, Daniel. I won't be there. I turned off my phone before he could respond. If they didn't want me or my children at their table, fine. I wouldn't be part of their world at all, and they were about to find out what that really meant. For years, I had been the reliable one, the one who always helped when they needed something. When my parents needed someone to pick up their groceries, they called me. When their Wi-Fi stopped working, I was the one who drove over to fix it. When they wanted help organizing a family party, I was the one stuck making calls and running errands. And Daniel? He got to be the golden child, doing the bare minimum while reaping all the rewards. But if I wasn't part of their preferred family, then they weren't going to benefit from me anymore. A week before Thanksgiving, my mother called again. I debated ignoring it, but finally answered. Hello, Allie, she said, her tone cautious. I just wanted to check in. I know you were upset, but I really hope you'll reconsider. We would love to have you and Liam there. Not you and the kids, just you and Liam, I clarified. She sighed heavily, as if I were exhausting her. I just don't understand why you're being so stubborn. It's just one night. You know how much Daniel's boys mean to us. And there it was, the final painful confirmation that my children, the two little humans I loved more than any, would never be enough for her. I clenched my jaw. You've made it clear where we stand, Mom. I won't bother you again. Allie, don't be like this, she said. I ended the call before she could finish, and this time I didn't cry. I started small. When my dad called me that weekend to help him set up his new television, I let the call go to voicemail. When my mom sent a text asking if I could pick up her prescription, I left it unread. For years I had been at their beck and call, always available, always reliable. But not anymore. And it didn't take long for them to notice. By the time Thanksgiving rolled around, I had missed a total of 12 calls and ignored 6 texts. Then, on the morning of Thanksgiving, I got a message from Daniel. Mom and Dad are really upset that you're ignoring them. Are you seriously going to let this go this far? Me? It already went too far when they told me my kids weren't welcome. This time, he didn't reply. I put my phone on silent and turned my attention to my real family. Emma and Lucas were at the table, helping Liam mix pancake batter. They were covered in flour, laughing hysterically. This was our Thanksgiving, and for the first time in years, I felt completely at peace. But little did I know, my parents weren't done yet, and their next move would be something I'd never forgive. Thanksgiving morning was peaceful in a way I hadn't experienced in years. There was no rushing to get the kids dressed in their best clothes, no stress over making the perfect side dish. No anxious glances at the clock to make sure we weren't late. Instead, we were in our own little world. Our home was filled with laughter, the smell of pancakes and maple syrup hanging in the air. Emma and Lucas took turns stirring the batter while Liam flipped the pancakes with exaggerated skill, making them giggle every time he almost dropped one. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. Then, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. It was Mom. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, it rang again, and then again. Liam shot me a concerned look. Want me to turn it off? He asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. No, if it's an emergency, I should at least know. I swiped to answer, keeping my voice flat. What is it, Mom? Oh, now you pick up, she huffed. I suppose you're just sitting at home feeling sorry for yourself while we're all here having a lovely dinner. I sighed. Mom, if you called to gloat, I really don't have time. That's not why I called, she said, her voice turning sharp. I need to ask you something. I pinched the bridge of my nose. What now? Did you cancel the credit card? She asked. The room suddenly felt very still. I turned away from Liam and lowered my voice. What are you talking about? Your father's credit card, the one we've been using for groceries, gas, essential things. It was declined this morning. A slow, icy realization crept up my spine. The credit card she was talking about wasn't theirs. It was mine. Years ago, when Dad was recovering from surgery and money was tight, I had added them as authorized users on my account temporarily, just to help them through a rough patch. I had meant to remove them when they got back on their feet, but life got busy and I had forgotten. And they had never reminded me. I clenched my jaw. You mean my credit card? A pause, then Mom scoffed. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Allie. It's just a card. You make good money, and we figured. Figured what? My voice was shaking now. That I'd just keep using my money, that I wouldn't notice. Oh, don't act like this is some big betrayal, she said. We raised you. The least you could do is support us now. I inhaled sharply. Are you serious? After telling me my kids weren't good enough to come to Thanksgiving, you still expected me to keep paying for your groceries? Are you even hearing yourself? Mom let out a long, dramatic sigh. You know what, Allie? This is exactly why we don't like having difficult conversations with you. You always overreact. Overreact? I was done. You're right about one thing, I said, my voice dangerously calm. I did cancel the card, and since we're having honest conversations now, let me make something very clear. You won't see another cent from me ever. Mom gasped, as if I had slapped her. Allie, don't be ridiculous. I cut her off. And while we're at it, don't expect Christmas gifts, birthday gifts, or anything else either. You made your choice when you told me my kids weren't welcome, and now I'm making mine. Silence. Then, in a voice colder than I'd ever heard from her, she said, You'll regret this. And then she hung up. For a moment, I just stood there, gripping the phone so tightly my fingers ached. Then, slowly, I turned back toward the kitchen. Liam was watching me carefully. Everything okay? He asked. I forced a small smile. Yeah, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Just taking out the trash. He didn't ask any more questions. We spent the rest of the day in our own little Thanksgiving, watching movies, baking cookies, playing board games. For the first time in years, there was no underlying stress, no need to walk on eggshells, no pressure to be someone I wasn't. But as peaceful as it was, something told me this wasn't over, and I was right. 3 days after Thanksgiving, my phone lit up with an incoming call from Daniel. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the best of me. I exhaled sharply and answered. What do you want? I snapped, skipping any pleasantries. What the hell, Allie? He snapped back. Mom just called me in tears, saying you cut them off. What is wrong with you? I closed my eyes, pinching the bridge of my nose. Did she also tell you that they've been using my credit card for years without my knowledge? A pause. Well, she said you were helping them out. Helping them out? I let out a humorless laugh. Daniel, they've racked up thousands of dollars on my account without asking while treating my kids like garbage. But sure, let's act like I'm the bad guy here. He sighed, clearly trying to control his frustration. Look, I get that you're mad, but cutting them off completely? That's extreme. You mean the way they completely excluded my children from Thanksgiving? I shot back. They just wanted a peaceful evening, Allie, he said. Mom said your kids can be a little wild. My grip on the phone tightened. Oh, I see. So they can use my money, but my kids aren't good enough for their table. Got it. He groaned. You're twisting this. No, Daniel, I'm finally seeing it for what it is. There was a long pause, then his voice turned calculating. Look, maybe we can work something out. What if you just kept helping them but set limits, like a smaller monthly transfer? That way, no one has to suffer over a misunderstanding. A cold laugh bubbled up in my throat. Let me get this straight. You want me to keep sending them money after they literally told me they love your kids more than mine? They didn't mean it like that, he grumbled. They said it, Daniel. He had no response for that. After a moment, his voice turned stiff. Fine, if you want to be selfish, that's on you. But don't expect mom and dad to forgive you anytime soon. I smirked, shaking my head. I'll survive. Then, before he could argue, I hung up. For the next few weeks, my parents played the silent treatment game. No calls, no texts. I figured they were hoping I'd cave, come crawling back, begging for their approval like I always had. But what they didn't realize was that for the first time in my life, I didn't need it anymore. And just when I thought they'd finally given up, they pulled one last desperate stunt. It was the week before Christmas when the letter arrived. Liam found it in the mailbox, his brow furrowing as he read the sender's name. "It's from your parents," he said. I stiffened. Oh, great. Let me guess. Guilt, manipulation, or straight-up gaslighting? He smirked. Why don't we find out? I took the envelope, my stomach twisting as I tore it open. Inside was a formal legal document. My breath caught as I read the words. They were demanding reimbursement for years of emotional and financial support. I let out a disbelieving laugh. You've got to be kidding me. Liam took the letter, scanning it quickly. They're saying you owe them for raising you and for all the financial sacrifices they made for your well-being. He looked up, jaw tightening. Are they actually trying to bill you for your own childhood? Apparently they were. They had even included itemized cost things like food, clothes, school supplies, medical expenses from when I was a child. And at the bottom of the page, a final sum, $78,542. I blinked. They seriously think I'm going to give them nearly 80 grand? Liam scoffed. They must be desperate. I exhaled slowly, anger burning through me. This wasn't about money. It was control, a final desperate attempt to pull me back into their grip. I looked at Liam, my mind already made up. I think it's time I pay them a little visit. The next day, I drove to my parents' house, gripping the letter in my hands. I knocked, and when Mom opened the door, her face immediately hardened. "Oh, so now you show up," she said. I didn't rise to the bait. I held up the letter. "You seriously thought this would work?" She folded her arms. "It's what's fair." I let out a sharp laugh. Fair? You want to charge me for being your child while expecting free money from me for the rest of your lives? Dad appeared in the doorway, his expression smug. "We sacrificed a lot for you, Allie, and now you're abandoning us." I stared at them, shaking my head. "No, Dad, you abandoned me when you made it clear that my kids weren't good enough, when you lied and stole from me, when you put a price tag on my worth." Mom's lips pressed into a thin line. "If you don't want to pay, then I guess we'll have to involve lawyers." I met her gaze, unfazed. "Go ahead." She blinked. "What?" I crossed my arms. "Take me to court. Try to explain to a judge why you're suing your own daughter for expenses from 20 years ago. See how that goes." Silence. For the first time, they looked unsure. Dad cleared his throat. "We just thought you'd want to make things right." I laughed. "Oh, I am making things right now." I ripped the letter in half, watching their eyes widen. "I am done being your personal ATM," I said. Mom gasped. "You ungrateful little..." I turned on my heel. "Merry Christmas," I called over my shoulder, striding back to my car. And, for the first time in my life, I felt lighter as I drove away. I thought that after ripping up their ridiculous demand for money, my parents would finally back off. That maybe, just maybe, they would sit in the wreckage of their own arrogance and realize that they had pushed me too far. But people like them, they don't change, they just escalate. But people like them, they don't change, they just escalate. It started with small things, like a text from Mom 2 days before Christmas. "Mom, Allie, this is ridiculous. We're family. You don't turn your back on family over a silly argument." I ignored it. The next day, another message. "Mom, we forgive you. Come to Christmas dinner, and we'll forget this ever happened." I almost laughed. They forgive me? Then, a few hours later, one from Daniel. "Daniel, they're really hurting, Ally. Just apologize so we can move on." I rolled my eyes. Of course, in his world, I was the one who had done something wrong. I typed out a response. "Me, funny, they weren't hurting when they were stealing from me or when they told me my kids weren't welcome. I think they'll survive." I hit send and blocked his number. Christmas Eve arrived, and Liam and I had just put the finishing touches on the tree. Emma and Lucas were in their pajamas, dancing around the living room, too excited to sleep. It was perfect. And then the doorbell rang. Liam and I exchanged a look. "No way," he muttered. I walked to the door and peered through the peephole. Sure enough, it was Mom and Dad. I considered ignoring them, but then I spotted what they were holding: a giant, beautifully wrapped box. I sighed and opened the door. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice flat. Mom's face lit up with forced cheerfulness. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." Dad held out the gift for the kids. I folded my arms. "No thanks." Mom's smile wavered. "Allie, don't be stubborn. Let's not ruin Christmas over this." "You already ruined Christmas," I shot back, "when you told me my children weren't good enough for your table. Remember that?" Her mouth opened, then closed. Dad sighed. "Come on, Allie. Let's just be a family again." I stared at them, feeling nothing but exhaustion. "You don't want to be a family," I said quietly. "You want me to go back to being useful." Their silence told me everything I needed to know. I shook my head. "Take your gift and go." Mom's expression hardened. "Ally, don't be selfish. Think about the children." I smiled coldly. "I am thinking about the children. That's exactly why you're not in their lives anymore." Dad's jaw tightened. "You really want to do this?" I exhaled. "I already did." And with that, I shut the door in their faces. That night, we had the best Christmas ever. Emma and Lucas tore into their presents, their laughter echoing through the house. We drank hot cocoa, played board games, and watched Christmas movies until they fell asleep on the couch. And for the first time in my life, Christmas wasn't about trying to prove myself. It was about us, real family. Chosen family, the kind that doesn't come with conditions, the kind that doesn't make you earn love, the kind that loves you because they want to, not because they expect something in return. I thought that was the end of it, that after being cut off financially, humiliated at Christmas, and rejected at my front door, my parents would finally accept that I was done. But I underestimated just how much control they thought they still had over me. Because on New Year's Eve, they did something I never saw coming. New Year's Eve was supposed to be a fresh start, a night to leave the past behind and step into a better future. That's what I told myself as I set up the snack table, laughter and music filling our home. Emma and Lucas were buzzing with excitement, running around in their little party hats, counting down the hours until midnight. Liam was pouring champagne for us, a soft smile on his face. It was our night, our celebration. And then the nah. I froze, my stomach twisting. Liam glanced at me. He knew. I walked to the door, took a deep breath, and opened it. And there they were: Mom, Dad, Daniel, and Daniel's wife, Sophie. It was an ambush. I crossed my arms. "What do you want?" Mom smiled, but it was the same forced, sugary tone she always used when she wanted something. "We just want to talk." "No thanks," I said flatly. Dad sighed. "Ali, enough. You've made your point. Now let's fix this before things go too far." I narrowed my eyes. Too far? What does that even mean? Mom exchanged a look with Daniel. "We just don't want this to affect the kids." Something about her tone made my skin crawl. "What are you talking about?" Daniel stepped forward, arms crossed over his chest like he was the one who had been wronged. "Mom and Dad have been talking to a lawyer." A cold wave of dread rolled through me. "A lawyer?" I repeated slowly. Mom nodded, her eyes gleaming with false sympathy. "We're just worried, Allie. You've cut your children off from their real family over a silly misunderstanding. That's not fair to them." I felt my pulse pound. "What are you trying to say?" Dad cleared his throat. "We've been looking into grandparents' rights." For a moment, all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. Then I laughed. It wasn't a small chuckle. It was loud, unhinged, and sharp. They thought they could legally force their way back into my life, into my kids' lives. Daniel's face twisted. "What's so funny?" I wiped my eyes. "Oh, you're serious? You think any judge is going to look at this situation and side with you?" Mom's lips pressed together. "We've done nothing wrong." Nothing wrong? I repeated, stepping forward. You stole from me, you treated my kids like second-class citizens, and now because I finally cut you off, you think you can bully your way back in? Dad's face darkened. You don't want to do this, Allie. I met his glare with a smile. Oh, but I do. I pulled out my phone and held it up. I want you to think real carefully about what you're about to do, I said, my voice cold, because I've got every text, every voicemail, every demand for money, and I promise you, if you try this, I will bury you. Sophie gasped. Allie, come on. No? I snapped, eyes locked on my parents. You have no case. You know it. I know it. And if you keep pushing me, I will make sure that everyone you know sees exactly who you really are. A beat of silence. Then Mom's face twisted in anger. You're being unreasonable. I smiled. No, Mom, I'm finally being smart. I stepped back into my house and grabbed the door. Happy New Year, I said sweetly. Then I slammed the door in their faces. They never went through with their pathetic legal threat. They knew they had nothing. They knew they had lost. In the weeks that followed, I didn't hear from them, not a text, not a call, nothing. And for the first time in my life, it felt like freedom. The weight of their expectations, gone. The pressure to please them, gone. The endless cycle of guilt and manipulation, gone. Months later, on a sunny spring afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, watching Emma and Lucas chase bubbles in the yard. Liam handed me a lemonade and sat beside me. It's been quiet, I said. He nodded. Feels good. He smirked. Think they'll ever try again? I sipped my drink, watching my kids giggle as they popped the bubbles. Doesn't matter, I said, because I had already won. I had my kids, my real family, and I'd never let anyone make them feel unwanted again. And that was the end of it.